With game one still a few days away, we're joined by Michael Pina of Sports Illustrated to help preview Miami's upcoming playoff run and to offer the dreaded national media perspective on Jimmy Butler, Tyler Herro, Bam Adebayo, and much, much more on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Heat Nation. It's a Thursday edition of Locked On Heat, your daily podcast covering all things Miami Heat. However, you may be listening or watching on YouTube, Odyssey, or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for making us your first listen every day. I'm David Ramil, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Wes Goldberg. We're recording this on a Wednesday afternoon, so still no clarity regarding Miami's upcoming opponent in the playoffs, but to help us preview that series, a staff writer over at Sports Illustrated and the co-host of the Open Floor podcast, it's Mr. Michael Pina. How are you doing, Michael?
I'm wonderful, David. How are you guys doing?
Doing great, man. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show.
Absolutely. Before we start, can I ask you guys a question?
Yes, of course.
Just want to throw everything off the rails from the jump.
That's how we do things around here.
What team do you guys want to see the Heat face in the first round, with it being up in the air right now?
You're getting into one of our questions for the show, so good for you for doing your homework.
We're throwing it off the rails. Let's go.
Yeah, it's okay. Of the three teams that are potential opponents, Cleveland, Charlotte, or Atlanta, I don't know that there are any of them that's. I think they're all particularly easy for Miami, to be 100% honest with you. I think Charlotte might be the easiest opponent, and Cleveland might be the most difficult if they can get Jared Allen back. But it seems like there's no realistic chance of him returning and being integrated at full strength. So at least that's my take on it. Wes, what about you?
I don't know. I probably Charlotte just because they're the more fun team to watch. I like watching LaMelo and Miles Bridges. The Caleb Martin versus Cody Martin thing could be a fun storyline for a couple days. None of those teams are very interesting, to be honest. Like the Cleveland thing is like, that was fun. Then now they're injured, and now it's kind of depressing. Atlanta, I guess, like the Trae Young experience is there. I don't know that it matters all that much.
Michael, do you have a take on it?
Are you predicting a first round upset depending on the matchup?
No, I'm not predicting a first round upset.
Cavs in 5, according to Michael Pino, Sports Illustrated.
Just say it so we can clip it and then put it on social media.
I do think there's a little look if John Collins is healthy, I think there might be a little bit of disrespect towards Atlanta. I think Atlanta is actually a pretty good team. I can't quit them for whatever reason. I know that they've been highly disappointing all season. Defensively, they got a lot of issues, but I would not, in a 7-game series, be super pumped about trying to strategize to slow Trae Young down and slow down all their 3-point shooters. And when they shorten their rotation and Trae's playing 45 minutes a game, that's tough, but I'm not saying that they'd lose. I just think that would be a really interesting matchup.
Of the three, that's probably the one that the Heat don't want to see now that the Nets are out of it. And the Hawks are funny because they kind of carry themselves like a team that can flip the switch, even though they haven't really earned that. But maybe they can, like, a little bit. Maybe it's not like a full flip of the switch, but maybe it's like more like those light switches that you kind of scale up and down a little bit, and it's just one of those.
Dimmer. It's got a
dimmer.
switch.
Yeah, maybe they have the dimmer switch, and they've just had it like on like dark all season long, and they're just gonna brighten it up a little bit. But yeah, I think of the three, they're probably the most challenging because they're the best player of those three.
Yeah, I guess that's a good take. Well, Michael, you had written a recent piece regarding the Miami Heat called Your 6 Burning Questions, which, by the way, we have a segment of the show called 5 Burning Questions, so expect a note from our lawyer sometime soon. But in any case, the 6 burning questions, you wrote it right after Miami's 4-game losing streak, and of course, clipboard gate and everything else that was involved with Miami. And since then, of course, they've won 6 straight games, 6 of their last 7, because of course they lost that season-ending game against the Orlando Magic, where Victor Oladipo scored 40 points. So, what's your takeaway from the Heat and that 4-game stretch versus the Miami Heat that we saw beat your Boston Celtics during that 6-game stretch and look like a pretty convincing title contender? Which one of these teams is more realistically the version of Miami that we could expect to see in the playoffs? Is it the 4-game loser or the 6-game winner?
I mean, I don't think that for a team that's the number 1 seed, they lose. What was it? Yeah, 4-game losing streak. They blow games to
Golden State, New
the
York,
Warriors that have
yeah.
nobody. The Knicks are a joke, and Randall didn't even play, which I don't even know if that's a bad thing.
Right. Might have helped their chances.
Right. And like there's obviously the blow up, an outburst that is, that's something that's like bubbling for a while and whatever. I don't think like their on-court, who they are, their on-court identity was really reflected in a losing streak like that. Like the regular season's really long and every team goes through lulls like that. Not necessarily to that point, but with the fireworks display. But I would definitely be leaning more towards them finding ways to win, grinding through on the defensive end, executing their switch everything, help everything, defensive system, really create difficulty for offenses. And then offensively, I wrote about this a little bit, and their half-court offense is actually ticked up as the season kind of went along, which I probably didn't give them enough credit for. And Spo makes the rotational adjustments, starts Strus, and we'll see kind of how that shakes out in the playoffs, if that holds true, or if Duncan can reassert himself in the starting 5. But I think that Miami's a really good basketball team. They're deep. Victor Oladipo had that big game in the last game of the season, and we'll see how he kind of fits into their postseason rotation, if at all. So I like Miami. They have the best coach in basketball. There's really they're a really interesting number 1 seed. And they've probably been disrespected by people who don't watch them every night because of there's a variety of reasons why, but they're really good and should be feared in a 7-game series. Absolutely.
What have you? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I wanted to ask because I know that you're based in Brooklyn. You're sort of a northeastern guy. Are you are you one of these northeastern loyalists who also believe that it's Boston, Brooklyn, and Philly? Those teams are superior to Miami?
No, not at all.
Okay. So there's Boston and everybody else, I guess. I think that's right.
I'm a loyalist to numbers and to what my eyes tell me with teams, and historically over the past recent history with what an organization has done on the court. And I'm a believer in continuity, and a lot of these guys were in the finals a few years ago. So no, I'm a big Miami Heat believer. I didn't necessarily expect them to get the number 1 seed, especially considering Bam's injury, Jimmy being in and out of the lineup, Kyle Lowry missing 13 games, I think, due to personal reasons. Tyler Herro leading them in usage. I didn't necessarily expect that. If you told me all that before the season started, I wouldn't have said they were a number 1 seed. Right. Number 1 seed. But no, it doesn't ultimately surprise me that they're really good on both ends of the ball, that they bring it every night defensively in particular, and that, integrating Kyle has been not that hard, and he's still an incredible defensive player who will probably get all defensive team votes. So no, I like Miami. I respect them a lot.
So with that in mind, playoffs all about the matchups, right? And things like that. And I think there's a pretty clear group at the top of the East, and then there's some teams that are in the playoffs, but we don't really think are going to make it all that far. But what team of that Boston, Brooklyn, Philly group, and Milwaukee, what team should be most scared of Miami because of what the Heat could do in a potential matchup, do you think?
I mean, Philly kind of like is the antithesis of everything that Miami is about. And like, one team just really knows what it is, treats every possession a certain way with a certain dignity. The Philadelphia 76ers just don't do that. And I wrote a piece today about their, big rotational questions that they have going into the postseason where, are you going to stagger your two best players? It's like fundamentally, it's just like their roster is not, it's extremely top heavy to me. And in moments when Joel Embiid has to sit, like, I just think they're going to fall apart in the playoffs, and would be just eaten alive defensively by the Miami Heat. So I think that would probably be like a team that just doesn't beat itself. So that's probably the team that I would be very confident that Miami can beat. And that's a team that Miami could face in the second round. Although like I'm picking Toronto in that series. So maybe they won't. So yeah, I would say Philly out of all those teams is the one that just would not have a fun time in a series against the Heat.
The flip side of that then is, which team do you think is best suited to beat Miami in an easily won series? I mean, of those four competitors.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Miami was like gonna get walked over or steamrolled by anybody. That's just not how they are in postseason basketball. And
well, that's not last year, man. Sorry to bring up old memories there.
Yeah, that's true. Last year was really weird for a lot of teams, and particularly the ones that went really far in the bubble. So I don't know. I kind of like. I'm not saying I'm like scratching it away entirely, but it's not that important to me when I'm factoring all this stuff in. You add Kyle Lowry, who's played really well, and gives you a dynamic that you didn't have last season. You had PJ Tucker, who, hopefully he can be healthy throughout a playoff run and knock down corner threes that kind of haven't been falling for him lately.
Yep.
But like, you can just play so many different ways, the Miami Heat can. And I really like that about them. Like, having Strus before the season started, I was like, Strus is actually like low key important to their rotation and to, here we are and he's a starter. But that I look at it as a good thing with the option of bringing a Duncan Robinson off the bench. You can stagger your lineup so that, and I hope that they do this a little bit more than they have been, but go back to those like aggressive DHO sets and actions with Bam and Duncan, and when Jimmy and Kyle are off the floor. And I know Spo is kind of tinkering with the rotation as it is, but there's just so many options and so many different lineup machinations that can have success. They can react to whatever the opponent is doing, go big, go small. Bam Adebayo is, I'm sure we're going to talk about him a lot. I love Bam so much. And if there's one thing I would love to see is just more touches, more shots, higher usage out of him. I think his offensive game is constantly improving. And yeah, like Miami, I don't think like any of those teams like go into a series with Miami being like, oh, like we can relax. Like Miami is really good.
Yeah, good point. All right, well, we're here with Michael Pina, Sports Illustrated. We'll get some more of his takes as Miami enters the playoffs in just a few days. But before we do that, just a reminder that betonline.net is your number one source for all of your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of the Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. Bet online, where the game starts. Thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Now podcast, nightly recaps of every NBA game with analysis from our local experts. Listen to Locked On Now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or watch it on the Locked On NBA YouTube channel. We're here with Michael Pina of Sports Illustrated right before the break. You brought up Max Strus because I don't think any of us expected him to be inserted into the starting lineup in place of Duncan Robinson. It was clear after the 4-game losing streak that they needed some kind of a rotational change. But what have you seen from the Heat since Strus entered into the lineup, and why do you think it's been working so well for Miami?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious upgrade in there is like defensively. Teams attack Duncan Robinson, teams attack Tyler Herro. Strus is just a little bit more of a rugged defender. I think he moves laterally better. He's stronger. Gives you a little bit more versatility, and teams will go at him and test him for sure. But I think he holds up a little bit better than those guys, particularly Duncan. So there's that element, and then he's just like, he hits threes. Obviously, he can stand still, knock them down.
Yeah,
he can come off screens, but he's got like a little, he'll put it on the deck, collapse the defense, and kick it out. Like I like that about him. I think that players like that are increasingly valuable in the postseason when guys are getting run off the 3-point line. And there's only so much dancing that Duncan can do behind screens, and when he's trying to execute those dribble handoffs, like sometimes it's like kind of a grind to get him open.
Oh yeah.
And it's like
that's why I was surprised you brought it up, that you wanted to see more of that interaction with Bam, because it just seems like Miami's offense has been so predictable, and again it gets run down. It kind of stagnates when you spend 10-15 seconds of the shot clock trying to get Duncan open off a screen and rescreen when Max is right there as a catch and shoot opportunity. He's a standstill player, or like you said, he can put it down on the deck too. So it just seems like Miami's offense clicks a little bit better with Strus as opposed to Duncan.
Yeah, I just, it's a great point by you. I think it's I haven't watched every Miami Heat game, but I just like the variety that it gives. And, I watched the Kings game. I was at the Nets blowout loss, and I was just like, where is this at? Like it's a different dimension that you have to defend it. Teams have learned how, and it's on the scouting report, but like to not go to it at all is just a little, I don't know. I'd like to see a little bit more of it, but yeah, Strus is awesome. And he's one of those types of players who, he's in this lineup and he doesn't need the ball to have a positive impact. I think that, coming into this season, playing PJ, Bam, Jimmy at the same time, spacing is a concern, and maybe we'll see that in the playoffs a little bit. Strus can open things up with his own gravity without taking too much away from their defense. So yeah, he's a really nice luxury to just have, and you can just put him in your starting lineup. Like I think that's really positive for them.
Yeah, there's a couple things with Strus that's really interesting as far as his kind of development this year. Number one, obviously, since the summer league, we knew that he could shoot, right? Like that was pretty apparent, but it wasn't that apparent to other teams, or maybe just other teams didn't really care that much. And it wasn't until like midway through the year that they started treating him as a shooter. And I found that really interesting. Like they still wouldn't like go hard over screens and stuff against him in the way that you would with Duncan. And so for so much of the year, even when Duncan was going through that long slump that he had, he was still the better floor spacer because of the way that defenses played him. And then finally, you start hearing like opponents yell "shooter, shooter" when Max Strus like comes into the game, or he's coming around a screen or whatever it is. And like as soon as that happened, like it kind of just became a matter of when and not if of Strus kind of taking Duncan's spot in the starting lineup, because he's just been better as a shooter all year long. Like he's shooting 40+%, and Duncan Robinson's still just sort of hovering around 36, 37%. So I think that's really interesting. I guess like the one concern I have about moving Duncan into the second unit is defensively, like, I guess you're not as worried about this as you would against other starters, but are there like backup guards who can be a little bit predatorial when it comes to hunting out like a Tyler Duncan Robinson backcourt in that second unit? And I guess the bet is that, like, hey, backups can't do that as well as the starters. But I just wonder if the Heat get into a situation where there is somebody on the floor while Tyler and Duncan are on the floor for them, that they say, you know what, we can't really survive with those two guys on the floor. And then if that's the case, like, I don't know that you move Duncan back into the starting lineup, but maybe you have to take him out of the rotation completely. Like, it's a really interesting thing that could happen in certain matchups. And then at that point, like, do you just shorten the rotation? Does Oladipo get minutes? Like, I don't know.
What have you thought about? Oh, did you have a response to that, Michael?
No, no. Go ahead, dude.
No, I was just. What have you seen from Oladipo? Like, we're at a point now where both of us are convinced that he's not going to be a part of the rotation moving forward. And then, of course, that 40-point outburst in the last game of the season has everybody convinced that now he's a much bigger part of the offense. That he probably will be. And I don't see it, Wes. I don't think you see it either. Have you seen anything from Oladipo in his return that makes it likely that he'll be part of the heavy part of the rotation, or just a contributor moving forward in the playoffs? Because he might be out of the rotation altogether, and that seems like a much more realistic possibility.
Yeah, I did not see the game against Orlando.
Nobody did. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I will say, like, those games are, it's wonderful that he had a scoring outburst for sure.
Right.
Like, take those with a grain of salt. I didn't watch it, but I can't imagine Orlando was like, 10 out of 10 up for that game. But what I've seen from Victor is, like, he's really far, obviously, from the guy who made an All-NBA team 4 or 5 years ago. 2 serious injuries that he's had to recover from. And so much of his value is the first step, the burst, the athleticism. And I don't know when / if that's going to come back. He settles a lot, can't get by guys that he normally would. Hasn't really adjusted to the speed of NBA basketball, and all of this is understandable, but it only gets harder in the postseason. So I find it, when Spo's trying to tighten things up, and he takes Morris out, he takes Oladipo out, I don't think he's doing that for no reason. So I would be pretty surprised if he was a factor in the playoffs for Miami. He's someone who can come in if someone were to get hurt and sprain an ankle. Yes. Having him on your roster is nice. That's nice to have, but
it's a luxury more than anything else. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. But I don't, he could get hot for sure. Spotting up, and, teams are kind of ducking under screens with him. So he could have a nice quarter that could win or swing a game if he was called upon, but he's not like a first option off the bench or a seventh man or anything like that, unfortunately.
It's going to be crazy when the Lakers sign him as like their third star this offseason or something. I could already see that headline out there. You mentioned options off the bench, and you wrote in your piece, it was either came out today or yesterday, whenever people are listening to this. You had Tyler Herro as your sixth man of the year on your awards ballot. And you wrote, Herro won't be the unanimous pick, but he probably should be. I don't know if that was a John Hollinger subtweet, but it kind of felt like it. But why? Like, can you explain that a little bit? Like, the fact that he might not be unanimous, which, a unanimous pick in anything is tough, these days, unless you're like Steph Curry circa 2016. But but he probably should be. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, he kind of personifies what a sixth man of the year is. He's 20 points a game, 40% from the 3-point line, just primary ball handler off the bench. They'll give him the ball in crunch time, and he's like the source of offense that they need. And I mean, he's just a bucket getter. Like, it's like, that's what sixth man of the year is all about, like, for better or worse, just living in reality. So that was a subtweet.
Yay, points.
I was like I was surprised by that. Not to take anything away from Kevin Love, who has been really important for a good team. Or someone like Bogdan Bogdanovic, or I think Cam Johnson in
Yes.
Phoenix has had like a really,
Yeah.
really fun season off the bench where he provides like a lot of things that on both ends that Tyler doesn't. But like, look, like this is what like all the voters just they look at points per game, they look to see who comes off the bench, and that's how the votes are tallied. So like that's why, and I think Tyler's really good too, and really important to a number one seed. So like the case is just it's like if there ever was cooked up in a lab a six man of the year winner, like this is it. So I've had like a really difficult time imagining anyone voting for someone else, and then I saw that someone did.
But you also wrote about it in your six burning questions that there's kind of like an over reliance on Tyler as like the offensive savior at times when things get slowed down, and you see it as a potential concern for Miami in the playoffs, right?
I think from the sense that needing to have someone on the court who is also going to be attacked defensively is like if you go into, let's just say the Raptors win and the Heat win and they play each other in the second round. It's like in the fourth quarter of every game, Hero has to be on the court, right? And Pascal Siakam is just going to call his man up for ball screens over and over. He'll do that in the second quarter. Nick Nurse will match up their minutes. I'm like, that's just like going to happen. So it's on time. It's not like you're not punting the idea of, okay, just because this is happening, Miami can't win these possessions. Like it's on Tyler Herro, who, if you look at like the switch numbers, hasn't been atrocious all season, but like he's got to either hedge and recover. He's got to, whatever the game plan is, he's got to execute it. He can't give up ground if they do switch. And when that happens, everyone behind the play needs to, Bam needs to lock in on his help responsibilities, PJ. And there's like a lot of really intelligent defenders on this team that could make up for any issue, and getting guys to shoot over the top isn't impossible, but he'll be attacked. And that's not really what you want.
It's a good point, and I know, like, after that Philly game where he was attacked over and over and over again, that got, like, a lot of play out there, and for good reason. Like, Tyler was attacked, and they lost the game because of it, basically, and since then, they've made a lot of different changes. We were talking about the rotation stuff, but also, like, one of the things that they've done defensively is, like, they started, like, hedging behind Tyler a little bit more every time he gets kind of picked up in an ISO situation. You see, like, PJ or Bam or Jimmy or Kyle, like, kinda just shading over just a little bit, just to kind of take it away a little bit. So it's one adjustment that's there. Obviously, those adjustments get a little bit harder. Adjustments happen over the course of a series and stuff like that. But it is absolutely something to watch.
Good point. Well, we'll take a little break here. We're here with Michael Pina of Sports Illustrated, and we'll talk about Bam Adebayo as Defensive Player of the Year candidacy in the next segment. But before we do that, just a reminder that Shady Rays is an independent sunglasses company that gives you the features of $200 sunglasses for a fraction of the price. That means polarized lenses, well-constructed durable frames, and premium high-end finishes. Also, something you won't find anywhere else is Shady Rays' insane protection program. Shady Rays includes loss and broken protection on every pair. They'll send you a brand new pair if you lose them, no matter what happens. So give them a try. If you don't love them, you'll pay nothing. It's as simple as that. They're backed by over 150,000 verified 5-star reviews, and on top of that, 10 meals are donated to fight hunger here in America when you shop with Shady Rays. So it's an exclusive offer for our listeners. Head to shadyrays.com. Use the code LOCKEDON to get 50% off 2 or more pairs of polarized sunglasses. That's code LOCKEDON for their best deal of the season, 50% off 2 or more pairs of Shady Rays sunglasses. Thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Now podcast. Nightly recaps of every NBA game with analysis from our local experts. Listen to Locked On Now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or watch it on the Locked On NBA YouTube channel. We're here with Michael Pina of Sports Illustrated. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about Bam Adebayo, because we know that you have been a longtime supporter of what Bam does. You've written about him a number of times. Bam has been a fantastic player despite the number of games that he's missed this year. He's been a strong defensive presence. You wrote about it in your 6 burning questions about the need to kind of lean into Bam more as an offensive player, especially late in games. But I believe that he did not finish as your number 1 candidate for Defensive Player of the Year. Is that correct, Michael?
That is correct. He was third on my ballot.
Care to explain that?
So I'll start by saying that I love Bam. Bam was my preseason pick for Defensive Player of the Year.
That's right.
If I forget if I wrote this in this column, or I definitely have written it in the past and said in the past, if I could have one player for a quarter, a possession, a game 7, if I need a stop, I don't care who's on the other team. If they're small, if they got everybody can shoot, everybody can make plays off the bounce. I don't care. Give me Bam.
Right.
I want him on the court. That's how much respect I have for him, how much admiration. It's honestly like we're splitting hairs between the 2 other guys that I ultimately had ahead of them. And there's a lot of things that go into it, and defense is really hard to quantify. But
Sure.
like 15 games, I'm just like, okay, the difference between Bam is not better than Marcus Smart enough to the point where these 15 games don't mean anything. So that was I guess like the tiebreaker when I'm looking at these all qualified candidates. Anyone who voted Bam Defensive Player of the Year, number 1, awesome. Like, that's great. He deserves it. If he wins, that's wonderful. So I have like nothing bad to say about him. And I actually fit him onto my first team all defense as a forward, which is kind of cheating. But the NBA said I could do it. So
we're supportive here, so no worries.
So that's like, so that's like how much love I have for Bam. And it's going back like 2-3 seasons. He's just like, he's a unicorn defender. And I got nothing bad to say.
No, I get it. You really think that the games missed are that significant? Like my feeling is that if he had played those games, would we have seen a lesser version of Bam? I mean, I just don't understand. Like when he's on the floor in whatever 50 number of games that he's played this season, he's still pound for pound the best defender in the NBA. So what does it matter whether he missed those games or not? I'm trying to wrap my mind around that rationale. It's not a knock on Smart either. He's a great defender. I think both of them are maybe not significantly better, but both of those are better than Jaren Jackson Jr., who you had second on your ballot. So I'm just trying to figure out how the games plays a factor in terms of like when he's out there, he's still the best defender in the NBA, at least in my opinion. And I don't get a ballot. So
yeah, I mean, 15 games. So he played 56. Smart played 71. That's 15, right? Like that's like 56 games is not. There's 82 games in a season. Like that's a lot of time missed. And like playing the whole point is like it's the Defensive Player of the Year, not who is the peak defender. So that's kind of what my mentality was. Critical in me picking him to win the award.
No. So I like how you put it, though, that if you needed one defender for one possession, one quarter, one game 7, whatever it is, you would pick Bam Adebayo. So with that in mind, look, I have nothing against the Defensive Player of the Year thing. I think I think there's more than those 3 guys that are worthy candidates, right? Like people got Rudy Gobert in their top 3, and you didn't have him, and that's fine. Like there's just a lot of guys. But if we were to do like a draft of defensive players for the playoffs, like would Bam be like your number 1 pick? Because now we're talking about guys like Giannis, who didn't give all the effort on that end of the floor all season long, which he didn't have to, but maybe in the playoffs, we know what his ceiling is. Like if you had to draft like an all defensive team, who would be your number 1 pick for the playoffs? Draymond, yeah, because he missed a ton of games. Yeah.
Draymond, yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, we should say that Draymond would have won the award if he didn't get hurt. So,
right. Or if he didn't even get hurt for as long. He probably, if you missed even like half if you missed as many games as Bam, he probably still wins it.
Right, he'd be getting more votes for sure. Yeah, you know, I had to think about that. I mean, Bam, he's as good as anyone. Like, he'd probably be the first pick if I'm drafting. What are we doing? We're drafting just the best defenders going
something
into the
like
playoffs.
That. It's something. They only have to play the one side of the court. You don't have to worry about the other side of the court.
Yeah, like Bam's terrific.
Yeah.
And it's hard to find I mean, I was like trying to find weaknesses in the numbers with him, and like the only thing I have is just how they protect the rim when he's on the court. But a lot of that is the system, and it's not really his fault. And so I understand that. And he's also a terrific defensive rebounder, despite switching out on the perimeter as often as he does. So yeah, sure. Bam Adebayo is my first pick in this draft.
A theoretical draft here. All right, cool. Good answer. You kind of redeemed yourself there a little bit. Before we let you go, I was curious. I have concerns about this, and I'm curious to see what your perspective is. You kind of hinted at it in that 6 burning questions piece. But what version of Jimmy Butler do you expect that we'll see? Because he's been great this season, but he's been kind of overlooked. And of course, harkening back to last year's playoff run, he was kind of mitigated completely by the Milwaukee Bucks and their defense. But moving forward, depending on how far Miami goes and the kind of opportunities that he'll get to prove himself, which version of Jimmy are we more likely to see? The version that we saw in last year's playoffs or the one from the previous year in the Orlando bubble?
If I had to bet, I would say somewhere in between. Like, I don't think he'll be even close to as bad as he was in that series against the Bucks. And I don't think, honestly, that we'll ever see, what he did in the finals ever again. Maybe we could. I wouldn't bet on it. I mean, it was like some of the greatest basketball of all time.
Yep.
But like because of, I mean, I have a lot of respect for Jimmy for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how he is physically. He's missed a lot of time this season. He's always out with a toe or an ankle or a tailbone or whatever it is. And just a lot of when you don't shoot threes and you're unwilling to let it fly, teams guard you differently. He's managed to still be effective off ball, but so much of like in the playoffs, if he's going to be isolating as much as he was, or even more as he was during the regular season when he isolated quite a bit for him, like hitting those contested 15-footers, like taking advantage and being a bully in the post when you get a switch and really capitalizing. Like, I have no doubt that he'll be able to get to the free throw line as much, but like, how often is he actually going to convert in those tough spots one-on-one? And how effective and efficient is he going to be as an ISO scorer and a post-up threat? Those are things that I'm looking for. We'll see. You could like the range of what we could see from Jimmy is really kind of not. I don't think that's a good thing, to be honest. But like, if he's to be their best player and play at a level that he was 2 years ago, then they're in terrific shape to make a deep run. And if not, then they could really struggle in a series against the Toronto Raptors if he's outplayed by someone like Pascal Siakam.
Yeah. Oh, you sound like a believer in Toronto. I know a lot of people.
I like Toronto a lot. Yeah, they're good. They're good.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time, Michael. Before you go, is there anything that you'd like to plug aside from your usual great work and, of course, all your great work over at the Open Floor podcast? Anything else that you'd like to promote or talk about?
How annoying is Rohan in the Slack channel?
Oh boy,
he's more of a text.
Okay.
In the text group, he's brutal. Every text group I'm in with him is muted. So
is it just food takes? Is it food takes or just everything from Rohan?
I wish it was food takes. I'll take food takes at this point. He embarrasses himself every day. God bless him.
Oh wow.
So yeah, no, I got nothing to promote really. Open floor, subscribe, listen, send us emails. That would be wonderful. But besides that, just thanks so much for having me on, guys.
Of course,
for
anytime.
coming on.
Just a reminder. Yeah, just a reminder. You can always reach us via email at lockedonheat@gmail.com or via Twitter using the hashtag AskAllHeat. Be sure to please subscribe to the show and to the Open Floor podcast, and always leave a review. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. This is David Ramil signing off for now. Thanks to you, Michael, and thanks to you, Wes, for joining us as always.